Imagine you're just an ordinary person, but one day, you suddenly land in a whole different world. And to escape, you must complete a mission, while uncovering shocking secrets along the way. So, what would you do? Well, that's exactly what happens to our main character. Let's see how he survives it all. The story begins with Yoon Shinji sharing his journey. He explains that he lost his parents when he was young, and his older sister, Yoon Won, raised him as if he were her own son. Even though they were poor, they lived a peaceful life. However, about a year ago, his sister started disappearing for a few days at a time, never explaining where she had been. 3 months ago, she vanished again, but this time, when she was found in an abandoned factory, she was badly injured. Since then, she has been in a vegetative state. To pay for her treatment, Yoon spent months working on a new business model, and today, he finally got the chance to present it to an investor. He believes this could be a huge opportunity. As he walks, a distant voice calls him dear and asks why he's wandering around alone. A girl grabs his arm and says that, as the beauty queen of the business school, plenty of big bad wolves are after her. Yoon asks if she's mistaken him for someone else, surprising her. She then notices his outfit and asks why he's wearing the same clothes as her boyfriend, accusing him of trying to take advantage of her. Just then, a man appears from across the street, demanding to know why Yoon is flirting with his girlfriend right in front of him. The girl runs to her boyfriend, crying, while Yoon suddenly notices something unusual. A warrior with red eyes and golden armor is charging straight at him on a horse. In mere seconds, the warrior tramples Yoon, knocking him to the ground. The boyfriend checks on his girlfriend and then realizes that Yoon is already lifeless. But at that exact moment, Yoon finds himself in a completely different place, underneath something soft and round. Confused, he thinks to himself that this sensation is nothing like what he expected after being run over by a horse. When he opens his eyes, he is startled to see a woman on top of him. He wonders where he is and who she is. The woman, however, is only looking for water. Yoon starts questioning whether he has died and if this place is the afterlife. The woman moves closer, resting on his leg, trying to get nearer in search of water. Quickly, Yoon backs away, telling her to calm down because he can't give her any. The woman, who is chained up, screams desperately for water, and suddenly, her tails appear. Yoon is shocked. He never expected to see a person with tails. She lunges at him, grabs him, and kisses him. A system message pops up, saying that the game's heroine has unlocked a random ability. It also states that once the heroine's favorability reaches 100%, she will be sealed into a book, allowing the host to summon her at will and unlocking a profession for her. Another message appears, assigning a survival mission for 3 days, with a reward of 1,000 points and a return to the real world. As he is being kissed, Yoon wonders why he is seeing system messages, if he actually traveled through time, and what all this talk about heroines means. Suddenly, a hand grabs him from behind, pulling him away and leaving the fox girl in the same position, still kissing the air. The man who pulled Yoon aside warns him to be very careful with that witch, saying that capturing her was no easy task. He also mentions that he noticed Yoon dresses strangely, probably because he's a foreigner. A drop of water falls onto the fox girl's clothes, and she catches it with her finger, putting it back into her mouth and shouting not to waste a single drop. The system notifies that the heroine's favorability has increased by 10%. She then says that since Yoon helped her quench her thirst a little, she'll give him some advice. He shouldn't trust that Taoist priest. The man yells, accusing her of trying to deceive people even when she's about to die. For a moment, he calls our protagonist a little devil but quickly composes himself and tells Yoon not to be fooled by her. He then comments that it's getting late, and monsters usually appear in the village at night, so it's safer to find shelter. Yoon wonders why the Taoist priest suddenly called him a little devil and finds the whole situation strange. A few minutes later, as they arrive in the village, a shadow is seen running in the distance. The protagonist asks the Taoist priest if he saw it. The man replies that he wasn't paying attention, but since night is falling, it's probably a monster. He then tells Yoon to call him Ling Shuzi. He explains that he came down from the mountains under his master's orders to capture the fox demon. If the fox demon has already been captured, why hasn't Ling Shuzi returned yet? The man freezes at the question, thinking Yoon would admire him for capturing the fox demon. Embarrassed, he says he still has some things to take care of, so he hasn't returned yet. At that moment, a young girl arrives and tells Ling Shuzi that he's brought another stranger. The priest tells the girl that Yoon is looking for a place to stay the night and asks if she would let him sleep at her house. She responds that she likes pleasant scents and agrees. As they walk through the village toward the girl's house, Yoon notices a strong, strange smell. When they arrive, the girl says this is her home and that her parents don't seem to be around at the moment. She tells them to make themselves comfortable and says she'll introduce them to her parents when they arrive, but she also warns that she's not sure she can resist her hunger. Yoon finds her words confusing. The Taoist priest says he has some matters to attend to and bids Yoon farewell, leaving him alone. The protagonist looks around the humble house, which has a strong fishy smell. Then, he notices the same figure he saw earlier running through the village. The man, covered in sticky mucus, desperately tries to warn Yoon to run away, saying that no one in this village is actually alive. He pleads for him to leave before sunrise. Yoon asks who he is, but just then, the young girl arrives and asks who Yoon is talking to. Without thinking twice, he runs out of the house, convinced that something is wrong with the village. He also thinks that the man he saw was probably a time traveler like him since he was wearing modern clothes and definitely knew something about the village. At that moment, a hidden mission is activated. Yoon stops for a moment and looks back, searching for the man. He figures the guy must have run really fast because he's already gone. Yoon finds himself surrounded by strange people, and a voice speaks up, saying that it has also been in this situation before and that there's nothing to fear because these people won't hurt him. The voice comes from a girl leaning against a nearby tree. She adds that, judging by Yoon's clothes, he's probably another traveler who was sent here unexpectedly. Yoon feels relieved to finally meet a human teammate who seems normal. The girl introduces herself as Xiao Qing. Under the red moonlight, the villagers become thirsty and extremely hungry. The girl realizes that when the Taoist priest mentioned monsters at night, he meant that the villagers transform after dark. Just as she starts talking again, an attack flies past her and hits one of the monster villagers behind her. Shocked, she stares at the fallen monster and asks Yoon where he got that weapon. He says he exchanged it in the systems shop for 100 reward points. She asks where he got those points and whether he needed to complete a survival mission to earn them. The protagonist realizes she hasn't activated the hidden mission yet and decides to search for the other team members. He also thinks she might have guessed he was a time traveler because of his clothes. At that moment, the monsters start getting back up. The girl is scared because, even after a direct headshot, they're still moving. Under the effect of the red moon, the transformed villagers charge forward. Xiao Qing turns to ask what they should do, but she realizes Yoon is no longer there. Running, he asks why she's just standing there. She calls him a bastard and asks how he could leave a girl behind like that. The monsters keep chasing them, and as they run, the protagonist keeps shooting. Xiao Qing asks why he's wasting bullets if they don't work. He says it depends on the purpose and explains that when the monsters are hit, they fall to the ground, giving them more time to escape. After a while, they get close to where the fox demon is. Xiao Qing asks why he brought her near the witch, implying that he's given up and wants a beautiful witch to eat him. Annoyed, the protagonist asks if she doesn't find it suspicious that Ling Shuzi never mentioned that the monsters were actually the villagers. Xiao Qing says that makes sense but asks what that has to do with anything. Yoon explains that the fox demon is clearly on the opposite side of Ling Shuzi, and even if she's not a good person, she might help them get out of this situation. Yoon approaches the fox demon, who calls him a great little brother for coming to bring her water, knowing she's thirsty. She moves closer to his legs, and Yoon tells her he can't give her water here, suggesting they go somewhere more private. Then, he lifts her chin and kisses her, making the heroine's favorability increase by another 10%. When he looks at her, he notices that her favorability has gone up again, and that's when he realizes, this is how he captures a heroine. Determined, he keeps kissing her repeatedly in different ways. A few minutes later, the monster villagers start approaching again. Xiao Qing yells in desperation, warning that they're coming and asking if he plans to keep having fun. Tired, the protagonist realizes that the favorability isn't increasing anymore and feels like all his effort was wasted. The fox says he almost suffocated her, but since he tried to help quench her thirst, she decides to help him this time. She raises one hand and casts a fire barrier in front of the zombie villagers. Xiao Qing notices that they're afraid of the fire and won't come closer, and she starts crying. The protagonist asks what's wrong and why she's crying. She runs to hug him and says she's emotional because he didn't have to sell his body to the witch to save them. She admits she misunderstood the situation, which is why she's crying. Yoon is confused and has no idea what she's talking about. As the fox drinks the last drops of water, she smiles and comments on how interesting humans are. The two look at her, and Xiao Qing asks what they should do now since the villagers are still surrounding them, and the witch is chained up, which limits her attacks. She concludes that they're trapped. The protagonist looks at the chained fox and notices a lock on the chain around her neck. He tries inserting something into the lock and thinks that, luckily, he has a keychain with him. He attempts to use it to free her. The fox, looking sad, says it's pointless because the chains are made of ancient black iron, meant to restrain dragons. She adds that Ling Shuzi used them to make sure she stayed trapped there and that no one in the world could break them by force. Suddenly, Yoon manages to turn the lock, surprising the fox. A system message pops up, notifying him that he has gained another 10 favorability points. Looking at the system panel, the protagonist recalls the instructions his sister gave him on how to unlock this type of lock. The system then announces that the favorability has reached 30%, revealing the heroine's true name. Shocked by the name, the protagonist wonders if she's the same one from the Legends of GI that he knows. He figures that the 1,000 points he'll earn from the mission are a nice bonus, but to make real money, he needs to complete hidden missions. At that moment, Xiao Qing notices that after seeing the witch unchained, the villagers ran away. The fox, now confident, says she won't let them escape because it's time for revenge. She raises her hand to attack them again, but Yun stops her and asks her to wait and let them go if possible. She asks him to give her a reason. In response, he puts the chain back on her, leaving her speechless. The next day, Daji is back in chains. A man arrives at the scene, imitating a dog. She, out of patience, says she has already told him many times that she's not a dog but a fox. The man, impressed, exclaims that the dog is talking. Daji refuses to respond, thinking this is torture. First, she met an old man, and now a guy with mental issues. Ling Shuzi approaches the man the same way he did with the protagonist and asks if he's strange. In his thoughts, wonders why this man arrived only today when the others showed up the day before. The man, who seemed a little off, says his name isn't strange, but Kai Iwanoyo. Looking at him, Ling Shuzi thinks this guy seems stupid, but that would only make it easier to trick him. He then starts saying the same things and invites the man to settle in the village. Meanwhile, somewhere nearby, Xiao Qing asks why the protagonist freed the fox, only to capture her again, suggesting it would have been better to let her take out all the monster villagers. At that moment, she's puzzled by the fact that the villagers had disappeared by the next morning. The protagonist walks up to her and asks if she remembers that the fox was captured by Ling Shuzi. With a look of disdain, she asks what that has to do with anything. He explains that it means the fox isn't strong enough to defeat Ling Shuzi. The mission was to survive for 3 days, but only 1 day had passed. He then gets closer to Xiao Qing and says that if finds out they saved the fox, there will definitely be a confrontation. He asks if she thinks they have any chance of defeating him with their current power. Xiao Qing realizes she misjudged Yun again, but there's more to it. The protagonist is interested in the dragon chain. He thinks it's a good artifact and that he could use it. He also recalls exchanging points for similar chains in the shop and is glad no one noticed. At that moment, Ling Shuzi arrives. He looks surprised and is about to ask how Yun is still there, but the protagonist interrupts him and asks why the Taoist priest looks so shocked. Ling Shuzi realizes he can't hide it anymore and tries to think of a way out. The protagonist notices that this person is also a team member, and a system message appears, notifying him that he has earned 100 points for finding another team member. Looking at the man, he realizes that with him, there are now 3 members, and the maximum is 100%. So, he deduces that there must be one more person on the team. He points at Ling Shuzi and says that he must be part of the group too. Ling Shuzi responds that he has no idea what the protagonist is talking about. Yun notices that the system didn't respond, but Ling Shuzi's panicked expression says it all. He also wonders where the last team member is. Kai approaches Yun and says it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Yun replies that he must be mistaken. Xiao Qing asks if he really doesn't know Kai, and the protagonist says he doesn't, but Kai spoke so convincingly that it didn't seem like he was lying. Xiao Qing says that while this guy may be an idiot, she wonders why he was the only one to arrive that day. The man explains that he actually arrived the day before but was wandering around and didn't enter the village. Xiao Qing asks how Kai survived the monsters that spread throughout the village. Kai says that's exactly why he didn't enter the village, because it's dangerous at night. The protagonist comments that Xiao Qing still calls people stupid, which actually shows a high level of intelligence. Annoyed, Xiao Qing asks if this guy is some kind of genius. Hearing this, Ling Shuzi understands why Kai wasn't seen the day before and didn't expect him to be this lucky. He then says that when he first saw Kai, he thought he had been bewitched by the fox demon. He adds that Yun and Xiao Qing must be doubting him now. Ling Shuzi tells them to follow him, saying he will explain everything. He begins explaining that the villagers of Longitan have a tradition of holding funerals for their loved ones and burying them in the lake at the back of the village. They believe the river's flow carries the spirits to eternal life, and this ceremony is happening right now. He concludes by saying that neither he nor the villagers expected eternal life to mean staying alive. In reality, they sacrificed living people to gain the power of the dragon god and achieve immortality. However, the dragon's power is evil, which turned them into monsters. The protagonist realizes that the person inside the coffin is the last team member, and Xiao Qing comes to the same conclusion. A system message appears, confirming that the last team member has been found. Xiao Qing says that Ling Shuzi must be telling the truth since she just received 100 points for the mission. The protagonist confirms that he got them too. Ling Shuzi, pretending badly, says that because he was focused on the fox demon, he didn't realize the villagers were monsters and almost wiped them all out. But in his thoughts, he tells himself that to keep lying, he needs to mix in some truth. He believes this half-truth will make everyone believe him. However, the protagonist neither trusts nor believes him and plans to use this half-truth against him. The villagers throw the coffin into the river and kneel by the lake, starting to transform into monsters. They rise and begin to scream loudly, making an unbearable noise. Xiao Qing and Kai struggle with the overwhelming sound. Ling Shuzi explains that this is the dragon's roar and that the villagers are doing it to honor the dragon god. But as he looks at Xiao Qing and Kai, he considers eliminating them right then and there. However, the protagonist, who was forming a barrier around himself, thinks the sound doesn't resemble a roar at all. It sounds more like the flapping of fish gills. He raises his hand, grabs Ling Shuzi's arm, and asks what he's planning to do. Ling is shocked that Yun isn't affected by the sound. He then says he was afraid the girl's screams would attract the villagers' attention, so he was going to stop her. At that moment, the villagers really do notice them and turn against them. Ling Shuzi tells them to split up to make it harder to get caught. Xiao Qing asks if this isn't the perfect time for the Taoist priest to show off his exorcism skills. Ling Shuzi asks if she really thought he would help them. She says no, she knows he's evil and just pretending, but she thought he could fake it a little longer and try to save them. Kai runs past them and asks if they want to switch from being chased to doing the chasing, saying he's the best at it. Meanwhile, the monster villagers are getting closer, while Xiao Qing and Yun are still standing frozen in place. He grabs her hand and starts running, telling her to ignore everything and not just stand there. After some time, Yun and Xiao Qing find themselves back at the same spot, facing the lake. The protagonist thinks that the most dangerous place might actually be the safest. Xiao Qing asks why he brought her back there, but Yun looks uncomfortable. She asks if he's okay, and he replies that he feels weak, really thirsty, and his throat feels strange. Xiao Qing says those are signs of dehydration, but it doesn't make sense since he was fine until now. As she steps closer to Yun, she accidentally kicks something on the ground. She looks down and sees a golden key. Yun tells her to be careful because there's a person lying there. Xiao Qing checks and says not to worry, it's just a guy who already kicked the bucket. Yun says he didn't expect her to be so brave and asks if she doesn't get scared seeing dead bodies. Xiao Qing explains that in real life, she's a beginner doctor and has seen many bodies before. The protagonist wonders if this is the same man he saw in the village yesterday, the one who warned him to leave quickly. While examining the body, Xiao Qing says something feels off. The muscles aren't stiff, and the body is still warm. She explains that it looks like all the water in his body evaporated and that he died recently. She also notices a lump in his abdomen and checks his wrist, noticing handcuffs. She wonders if he was a police officer. She asks how someone from this village could have a job from their world. Yun replies that it's because he's also a time traveler like them. Xiao Qing asks if Yun is saying that someone handcuffed him there. Maybe Ling Shuzi? Yun says no, but the man probably handcuffed himself. She asks how he knows that. The protagonist explains that Ling Shuzi is too cautious to tie someone up and leave the key nearby, giving him a chance to escape. Xiao Qing stands up, walks toward Yun, and asks why someone would do something like that. Suddenly, something bursts out of the man's stomach and lunges at Xiao Qing. The protagonist yells for her to be careful. He grabs her and pulls her away, then shoots at the creature. Xiao Qing asks what the hell that thing is. The creature dodges the bullets, leaving her confused. Even though the protagonist keeps shooting, he can't land a single shot on the fast creature. The monster flicks its tail and almost seems to laugh at him. Yun raises his toy to shoot again, but no bullets come out. Xiao Qing panics, realizing they might be out of ammo. The monster takes advantage of the moment and charges at them. Stammering, Xiao Qing asks the protagonist to tell her he's not out of bullets. Calmly, he replies that yes, the pistol is empty. Xiao Qing panics, thinking they're going to die there, but Yun tells her to stay calm because the one dying will be the creature. Just as the monster moves closer, the protagonist shoves the barrel of another toy into its mouth, confusing it. A system message appears, stating that the host has spent 1,000 points to exchange for a sniper rifle and will use 100 reward points for a bullet. With the creature in his sights, Yun says, "Bye-bye," and fires, hitting it directly and blowing it apart. Xiao Qing is shocked by what just happened. She asks where Yun got that rifle from, but he tells her to examine the monster's body instead of asking questions. She says there's nothing left to examine since it exploded into pieces, but based on what she saw earlier, it looked like a newborn. Looking at the remains, Xiao Qing is confused because the creature seemed to be full of human blood. The protagonist asks how she can tell, and she explains that there's a big difference between human and animal blood. The easiest way to distinguish them is by color. The protagonist realizes something he didn't want to happen has already happened. Xiao Qing asks why he looks so worried since he already finished the creature. Yun asks if she thinks the man was drained by the monster's offspring. Comparing this to the villagers, who were all wet, they might be parasitized by these creatures. The monster embryos might not kill their hosts until they hatch. Since they need a lot of water, that would explain why the villagers are always wet. Also, the baby monsters probably eat their hosts from the inside, merging with them over time. Eventually, the monster becomes the host itself, which is what the villagers call eternal life. Looking at the poor officer, Yun says that the man probably didn't want to attack others, so he handcuffed himself there. But he didn't expect that the monster wouldn't merge with him and would just burst out of his stomach instead. Seeing the protagonist coughing non-stop and looking dehydrated, Xiao Qing says he's probably infected too. The protagonist feels a sharp pain and agrees. He wonders when he got infected. He needs to replenish his water immediately because the mission is to survive for 3 days to return to the real world. Since today is the second day, he just needs to hold on a little longer. Xiao Qing pauses for a moment, realizing that the lake is their only water source. With no other option, an idea comes to her mind. She walks up to the protagonist, who asks what she's thinking. She holds on to him and tells him not to move. She says that since he has saved her life multiple times, she wants to do something for him too. Then, they kiss. Xiaoqing thinks this is the only way to get water into him. Yun holds her, leaving her confused about what to do next. She tries to stay focused, reminding herself that she's doing this just like he did with the fox sister and that she shouldn't mislead anyone. After they stop kissing, Xiaoqing says she doesn't have as much experience as him or the fox sister, but she did her best to save him. The protagonist looks at her and realizes this is what was worrying her. He had thought she figured out that he could simply exchange points for a bottle of water from the systems shop. He places his hand on her head and thanks her for trying to save him, but she pushes him away and tells him not to be so nice. She was just trying to help. At that moment, he thinks that a woman's heart is really hard to understand. A few minutes later, in front of the lake's waterfall, Xiaoqing asks why they came back there instead of hiding until the villagers return to normal in the morning. She also asks how he can be sure they will even go back to normal. She explains that the monsters appear at night, and at first, they thought they were real monsters, but now they know they're actually the villagers. The protagonist asks who told her that the monsters only appear at night, and she says it was Ling Shuzi. He responds that this means they can't be sure of anything since Ling Shuzi's identity is still unknown. Since this is the second night, he doubts the real enemy will let them get through the next night without trouble. Just like in games, there will be a boss, and it will appear when they think the mission is over. Yun looks at the lake and thinks about all the clues they found. Everything leads back to this lake. He suddenly jumps into the water, saying that the only way to understand what's really going on is to go to the bottom of Dragon Lake. Xiaoqing tries to stop him, but it's no use. A few minutes later, she watches from the shore, thinking that no one could possibly hold their breath for that long. She wonders what she should do. She pauses for a moment, remembering that she gave him her first kiss, so he can't just die like this. She throws off her shoes, hoping he's not dead, and then jumps into the water to look for him. She spots a silhouette at the bottom of the lake and wonders if he's drowning. She decides to swim deeper to pass him some oxygen and save him. Just as she's about to reach him and kiss him, she sees that the protagonist is fully suited up in diving gear. Shocked, she gasps, losing all her air and panicking even more. She thinks she's about to drown. Suddenly, she opens her eyes again and wonders if she's in heaven, but then she hears the protagonist's voice calling for help. He says he spent a lot of points to save her with this diving suit. Yun has found a huge chained-up box and asks for her help because he can't break the chains on his own. She asks if this is the coffin the villagers threw into the lake earlier. Xiaoqing tries to explain that she only came down to save him. The protagonist, opening the coffin, asks if it wasn't actually him who saved her. Inside the box, they find a humanoid lizard lying there. This confuses them because they expected to find the last member of their team. Looking closer, they notice the creature is covered in scales, not fish scales, but ones that look more like dragon scales. The protagonist asks Xiaoqing if she thinks it's possible that this could be the dragon god the villagers worship. She asks if they would really worship a dragon god that's already dead. The protagonist notices something that catches his attention and swims deeper. Meanwhile, Xiaoqing suddenly feels like her mind has gone blank. What he found was Longtan's life plaque, and he wonders why it's here. Xiaoqing points to the side and says it looks like something is swimming toward them. A group of furious fish-like monsters is rushing in to attack them. She says they're surrounded, but the protagonist asks who said they were completely surrounded. He then swims upward at high speed toward the opening above them. However, as the monsters see the protagonist and Xiaoqing leaving, they start shouting for them to wait, asking for help. Xiaoqing tells the protagonist that it sounded like the monsters were talking and wonders if she imagined it. Looking at them, the protagonist realizes that they really did speak. She asks how that's possible and points out that they're asking for help. The sea creatures say they are not monsters but people like them. Xiaoqing thinks they're trying to trick them and tells the protagonist to leave, but Yun swims back down. Xiaoqing asks how he can believe them. Yun moves closer to the aquatic beings and asks if they are the residents of Long Tan village. One of them says yes and explains that the ones in the village now are the real monsters, the ones who were originally just fish living in the lake. He goes on to say that their village always believed in the dragon that once lived in the lake, but no one knew that the dragon had already died. The dragon had been chained up at the bottom of the lake, and when it died, the fish living there consumed its body. So, the fish evolved into strong and intelligent marine creatures, but they hadn't noticed any changes in the lake until one day. He remembers that, as the village chief, he would always lead the villagers to perform their worship ceremony for the dragon god by the lake. But unexpectedly, fish monsters jumped out of the lake and dragged all the villagers into the water. The monsters swapped bodies with them and went on to land, while the villagers were forced to stay in the lake forever. Xiaoqing gets really scared after hearing about this body swap. The protagonist then realizes that Ling Shuzi is actually a team member, but a monster has taken over his body. He manages to collect the dragon bones and is surprised to find out they are an S-rank item. He raises one hand, and an explosion appears. Seeing this, the monster villagers start to think that maybe they can be saved. The protagonist asks them to continue explaining what happened. One of the monster villagers says that they're not the only ones in trouble. Even the queen of the forest, the nine-tailed fox demon, was tricked by the fish monsters. The same chain that was used to trap the dragon at the bottom of the lake was used to imprison her as well. Trying to understand the situation, the protagonist asks why the fish monsters would trap the fox demon. The villager explains that the fish king wanted to become a real dragon, but to do that, he needed to eat more dragons. The dragon had embryos inside its belly, and the fish king took those embryos and injected them into the fox demon, planning to use her body to hatch them. Since her body was strong enough to nurture multiple embryos, it was the perfect vessel. Xiao Qing then says that what came out of the police officer's belly was actually a baby dragon, but it never fully formed and just looked like a monster. Yuan realizes that this must be why he gained so much favorability with Daji. She wasn't thirsty, she was actually trying to transfer the dragon embryos to him. The protagonist then realizes that after kissing Daji so many times, he stopped gaining favorability points, which means she has already passed all the eggs to him. He starts wondering if this means he's doomed. A system message pops up, saying that the host has detected baby dragons inside him and that he can spend 1,000 points to convert them into dragon blood and become a hybrid. The protagonist thinks about it but doesn't fully understand what it means. He just knows it would make him no longer human. At that moment, everyone around him goes silent, and the fish villagers stare at him with teary eyes. A side quest appears. One task is to save the villagers, and the other is to eliminate the monster disguised as a villager. Whispering to the protagonist, Xiao Qing says that the villagers are hopeful he'll save them, which is why the side quest was triggered. He says he understands what they want and has a bold idea to make it happen, but he'll need their cooperation. Meanwhile, outside the water, he is talking to Daji. He tells her that he has already taken care of the villagers and that the babies inside her are about to hatch. As long as he eats the hatchlings, he will finally become a true dragon. Daji, irritated, says that he's just playing dirty tricks and, if he has the courage, he should release her so they can have a fair fight. He holds her face and asks her to calm down, saying he doesn't want to affect the baby dragon inside her. But Daji breaks the chains and says she won't accept any more humiliation. She declares that she is the most powerful demon in this world, and even if she loses her strength today, she will keep fighting him. Ling asks how she managed to escape since the baby should be draining her energy. Daji is also confused about breaking the chains, but then realizes that the protagonist must have swapped the dragon chain with a weaker one. At that moment, she thinks he's a real trickster and asks if he just enjoys acting like the good guy. She adds that she's starting to like him more and more. Meanwhile, the protagonist finally finds Kai, who is still being chased by the monster villagers. The two start running side by side, and the protagonist asks Kai to listen to him. He tells Kai to go find Xiao Qing at Longtan Lake and explains what he needs to do. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that he really can't do this himself and has to leave the task to that crazy guy. He shouts for Kai to go ahead and do what he said, assuring him that he'll handle the monsters for now. Kai yells back that he'll complete the task. Thinking about Xiao Qing, the protagonist silently apologizes and hopes she'll understand his little plan. Sometime later, back at the waterfall, Yun is running there, still being chased by the monsters. He wonders if Kai did what he asked, but then suddenly stops in shock. He says that Kai is truly a genius. Xiao Qing appears, tied up under the lake, and asks to be rescued. She never expected this to be the protagonist's plan. As he gets closer to her, he wonders where Kai and the others are. The protagonist says he never imagined Kai would tie her up like this. Looking at the monsters, he notices they are hesitating. He realizes he needs to push them a little more to make them take the bait. Turning to Xiao Qing, she asks what he's trying to do. He starts describing her, mentioning her shoulders, soft skin, and slim waist. Then he asks the monsters if they're sure they don't want to take a bite of her, saying she looks beautiful and delicious. Xiao Qing is completely outraged by this, but the plan works, and the monsters leap toward them. With a blank expression, the protagonist says that the fish have finally taken the bait. At that moment, the monster villagers jump out of the water and grab the monsters, pulling them back into the lake. The protagonist tells Xiao Qing that the best hunters are the ones who pretend to be prey. Since the monsters swapped bodies with the villagers, they could do the same. Shocked, Xiao Qing asks if this was his plan all along and tells him not to do everything alone. He should let others help. Meanwhile, back in the village, Ling Shuzi is running from the fox demon. He thinks it's best to avoid fighting her since he hasn't fully transformed into a dragon yet. As he gets near the river, he stops for a moment, exhausted, and wonders how she managed to escape. Could she really be stronger than the dragons to break free from those chains? Watching him from a distance, Daji asks where he thinks he's running to. She says it's time to settle things. Ling calls out to his subordinates, and several villagers emerge from the bushes, surrounding Daji. He tells her that in case she didn't know, all the villagers have been replaced by the fish, which means she is now surrounded. But just then, Yoon arrives and says that, actually, Ling is the one who's surrounded. Ling is shocked to see the protagonist still alive, but then starts laughing, saying that he must be trying to trick him. He orders his men to attack the protagonist, but then apologizes and says that he actually hired all of them, then commands them to attack Ling instead. Ling, confused, asks why his supposed subordinates are listening to a human. Realizing he doesn't have much choice, he jumps back into the lake. He says he didn't want his real body to take any damage, but he promises that when he returns in his true form, he will make the protagonist pay. At this moment, Daji's favorability toward the protagonist reaches 70%. She wraps one of her tails around him and asks how he pulled that off, saying she can't see through him and is becoming more and more curious about him. She also says he must have a lot of secrets hidden in his body, just like she does, and suggests they should have a deep exchange of ideas, so they can take care of each other. At the bottom of the lake, Ling finds his fish subordinates eliminated. Meanwhile, outside the lake, Daji hugs Yoon and asks if he's shy, offering to help him. She adds that his resistance only makes things more tempting. But just then, something rises from the water. Now in his true form, Ling says that this is not a matter for humans, and they could have even kept the peace. He explains that he only had his subordinates switch bodies with the villagers, so he asks why they killed all of them. He then questions if the protagonist and the others are ready for his revenge. The protagonist, smiling, says he wiped out all of Ling's subordinates so they wouldn't be able to seek revenge or switch bodies again. Ling says that's fine, but now he will fight Yoon for such cruelty. He launches a powerful attack at the protagonist, declaring that they will fight to the death. Furious, Daji reveals her true form and asks how Ling dares to lay a hand on the man she likes, adding that Yoon is hers alone. Xiaoqing asks why Yoon belongs to Daji. The protagonist, confused, says the issue isn't about being hers, it's about being prey. Daji then unleashes a powerful attack on the Fish King, so strong that it sends water flying and crashes into the other side of the waterfall. However, she quickly realizes that Ling's presence hasn't disappeared. At that moment, Ling counterattacks, launching multiple strikes at the nine-tailed fox. Water tentacles grab Daji and pull her into the lake. Ling asks if she knows why he keeps his true body in the water, and as she is dragged down, he explains that it's because water is his domain. Her fire won't work here. Then, Ling turns to the protagonist and says that it's his turn now. The villagers step in front of the protagonist and say that Yoon has already done enough for them. Now he can leave while they take care of the water beast. All the villagers come together, asking their great benefactor to run and leave the rest to them. But instead, he is overcome with a unique sense of happiness and confidence and charges forward at full speed. The villagers are moved to see that the protagonist chose to face the beast instead of running away. The Fish King, seeing this, says that humans have always been despicable and selfish, but admits that Yoon has exceeded his expectations. He asks if Yoon is stupid or actually brave. Then he channels his power and, out of respect, says he'll use his full strength to attack the main character. Yoon replies that to fight the Fish King, he has to let go. The monster asks if that's some kind of joke, then launches an attack but jumps into the water. A little girl from the village holds on to her leader's clothes, and when he looks at her, he decides he has to act. If their benefactor isn't afraid of being taken down, they shouldn't be either. He tells everyone to go help Yoon so they don't get humiliated by the monster. Xiaoqing tries to stop them and says everyone misunderstood. Ling, thinking he's figured out the protagonist's plan and believing he ran away, looks at the crowd and thinks there's no one left to fight. But when the village chief gets close to the water, he tells everyone to wait and says it's not the right time yet. Ling turns to look at the water and sees a huge whirlpool forming. He wonders what the hell is going on. Earlier, along with Kai, the main character had bought a drilling machine. He figured there was probably an underground river where the water could drain, so he had already planned with Kai to use the machine and open a path for the water to flow out at the right moment. He looks at the Fish King and says the water's been drained, then asks what he's going to do now. The beast is in shock, trying to understand how the protagonist did that. It rushes toward Yoon and says that even so, the power difference between them is like a god and a mosquito. It opens its mouth and says crushing the protagonist would be as easy as squashing an ant. But Yoon says he's not the real opponent. The protagonist turns to Daji and asks how long she plans to keep pretending to be asleep. She gets up and admits she didn't expect him to notice. Laughing, Ling says that since Daji's nature is fire, getting soaked weakens her power, while he can still fight even without the lake. Daji looks up and confirms it's true. She suggests they run into the forest, saying that as the forest queen, she can draw energy from the mountains and grow stronger. Hearing that, Ling asks if they think he's stupid and says he won't let them escape to the mountains. The protagonist then offers to help Daji. She's touched and says he keeps doing these things for her, and even if she dies today, today, she'll die happy. She asks him to play with her one last time, hugs Ion, and tells him to hurry because there's not much time. Yoon tries to stop her and asks what she's thinking, saying that won't help her. He pulls out a remote from his pocket and tells her to get out quickly before everything collapses. A huge explosion goes off, and Ling, watching from a distance, is shocked and wonders how Yoon did that. Seeing the destruction, the Fish King asks if Yoon is still even human. Meanwhile, the protagonist comes out from the side and says he just bought some explosives and set them up on the riverbank ahead of time. Daji takes the chance to absorb external energy and boost her powers. She thinks she never expected the protagonist to be like this, and now she wants him even more. Daji transforms back into her true form, a nine-tailed fox, and says now she wants to see how long a fish out of water can last. At that moment, Ling tries to escape blame and admits he was wrong, asking her to let him go. Then something catches Xiao Qing's attention. Something starts falling over them. Ling realizes it started to rain heavily. He lifts his arms, opens his mouth, and tries to absorb as much water as possible, begging for divine help. Daji gets angry since it just had to start raining now. She launches a powerful attack and says they need to finish this fight quickly. Ling dodges her attacks and says he thought he'd die this time, but even God helped him. He's the fish of destiny. Ling starts circling Daji fast, hitting her from all sides. He says that as long as there's water, he can keep improving his abilities. Because of the rain, Daji starts shrinking and losing power. Seeing her lose strength, Ling laughs at her and says the rain will drain her completely until she dies. He starts turning into a half-dragon fish. Even though he hasn't absorbed enough dragon babies, he says he can still become a dragon by gathering energy from the rain to evolve further. Xiaoka notices dragon claws and scales starting to grow on him, and his form keeps changing. That strange-looking fish says it's not just a transformation, it's an evolution. Confident, Ling says he's waited a long time for this moment. He starts absorbing a bit of Daji's power, and smoke surrounds his body. He celebrates, saying the fish has finally become a dragon. But when the smoke clears, Ling is completely skeletal. He wonders why he looks like that when he had absorbed energy from the young dragon. Why did it turn out this way? Kai says Ling's form is very unusual, and Xiaoka adds that this power is too abstract. Smiling, the main character asks Ling if he forgot that Daji had already passed the dragon baby eggs to him. Yoon turns to Daji and says that now everything depends on her since Ling failed to transform. But Daji had lost too much strength and had become tiny, like a cub. The protagonist is very shocked, while Kai plays with Daji like a little pet. Meanwhile, Ling can't accept that his transformation failed. He says he won't give up, that everyone, including the world, is wrong. He attacks everyone around, and whoever gets hit by those black lightning bolts starts turning into horrible-looking monsters. Ling confidently says that as long as the world is corrupt, he will still become a true dragon. He shouts that it's his destiny, that he's the leader of all, and he decides what is real or not. The villagers try to run from the attacks, and one of them shouts to stay away from the black lightning. Ling then turns to Yoon and says that since Yoon gave him this power, he'll be the one to finish him off. He charges a direct attack at the protagonist and asks if Yoon doesn't want to protect the villagers. If so, he'll just turn Yoon into a monster and make him hunt them. One of the villagers shouts that their savior is in danger and says they must form a human shield to protect him. But then, more lightning strikes around them, and people start transforming. With their final breath, they ask Yoon to run away. Ling says this human drama is touching, but asks what good it does. He laughs, saying it's ironic how the villagers Yoon wanted to protect are now monsters chasing him. At that moment, a powerful energy takes over his body, and he thinks there's no other choice but to try something new. He accepts merging with the dragon baby eggs inside him, turning into a human-dragon hybrid with SSS rank. A system message appears saying a new skill has been learned, Dragon Scale Transformation. The protagonist gets really interested in the skill. He starts by turning the zombie villagers into golden dragon eggs to protect them. These eggs can only be destroyed by weapons above S level. Ling laughs and asks if that's all. He says he thought Yoon was about to do something big. The main character looks at his hands and wonders if this is really an SSS level skill. A system message appears, explaining that his power is currently too low, so he can only unlock basic skills for now. Shio asks if it would be better to keep everyone inside the eggs so they can rest through the night and leave in the morning. Yuan asks her what would happen to the villagers after that. Suddenly, Kai activates an A-level skill and kicks one of the eggs, sending it flying. Xiaoqim and Yang are surprised by his sudden move. Meanwhile, the egg flies at full speed toward Ling and hits him directly, hard enough to make his eyes pop out. Ling thinks that his power can't break through those dragon scales. Xiaoqim celebrates and says the attack actually worked. The villagers then go to Yan and say they want to help too, asking him to turn them into eggs. The main character quickly agrees and starts turning them into eggs. Kai picks up a few eggs on his back and asks if this is like a free throw. A little girl inside one of the eggs tells him to hurry up, and another one, also being used like a toy, says the same. The last one says he's going to get back at Kai when he gets out, but Kai kicks all 3 eggs toward Ling, who asks what kind of attack this even is. He wonders how he could be losing to something like that. Seeing Kai's attacks, Xiaoqim asks if he's secretly a hidden master. Lying on the ground, Ling asks the main character to let him go, saying he'll disappear and never come back. But Yun replies that he can only promise half of that. Ling asks which half, and Yun pulls out his weapon and says it's the part where he'll never be seen again, then fires. At that moment, Yun completes the mission to eliminate the Fish King and receives a relic called Ling Chu's. A bright light appears, and the relic lands in Ion's hands. He thinks he already knew he would get extra points for defeating Ling Chu's, but the relic was an unexpected bonus. Later, Yun returns to the village and is warmly welcomed by the villagers, who kneel and thank him sincerely. Surprised, he thinks he's never experienced anything like this before and wonders if he should say something to them. At that moment, Daji runs toward him and jumps into his arms. She thinks about how he never showed fear toward the Fish King and how the villagers admire him now. She also thinks he's cold and straightforward. She says she really likes the main character now, and her favorability rating increases to 209. When the hero image is activated in the system book, the main character can summon her anytime. He then receives the card of the demon fox, Queen of the Forest, Daji. The main character asks the system if the profession he gets will be the same as the heroine he unlocks. The system replies that he has awakened a new S-class profession, but Yun is confused because the name of the profession is illusionist. The system explains that it's a very good profession for creating illusions and mixing reality with fiction, which can be very useful in battle. Later, the main character thinks about his first profession and wonders why his genes didn't evolve when he leveled up, but he decides to ignore it for now. He then asks some villagers where Xiaoqing and Kai are. The villagers, looking confused, say they saw them around not long ago. Time passes, and the sun begins to set. A little girl is crying under a tree. Yuan asks her what's wrong. She says that everyone was fighting against Lin Chuzi, but she knew that in the end, Mr. Lin and the others would never come back. She continues saying that even the main character will leave soon and won't return. At that moment, Yun points to the sky and asks Xiaoli to look. He used some reward points to create that illusion. The girl asks if Yun is some kind of god for being able to use magic like that. She then runs off to hug her beloved grandfather. The main character thinks that a magical death is like a child's game, but the people who remain must not lose hope and need to keep living well. Xiaoli tries to hug her grandfather but ends up passing right through him. She asks what's wrong and why she can't hug him. Her grandfather says it's okay and tells her to take care of herself, eat well, and sleep at night. He keeps asking her to look after herself. Crying, Xiaoli watches her grandfather's image fade into the sky and begs him not to go because she's still just a child and has so much to say. She then sits on the ground, feeling completely empty. Yun kneels beside her and says he's about to leave and asks her to take care of herself and grow up well. He stands up, and a light shines down on him as he says goodbye to the girl. But before he goes, she tells him that he doesn't need to lie to her. She already knew her grandfather was dead and would never come back. Even so, she thanks him anyway. At that moment, a Valkyrie appears and says that the last team did terribly and she was almost out of hope. But this time, she's surprised to see how well the team performed, with most members surviving. Xiaoqing, Kai, and Yuan appear on some kind of floating platform. Xiaoqing asks where they are and wonders if they weren't supposed to return to the real world. Looking at a glowing orb in front of him, the main character asks if it's some kind of magic table. Kai walks up and says it's a woman. The more you touch it, the more good stuff it gives you. Xiaoqing, confused, asks if he's seriously calling a glowing orb a woman. Just then, a message pops up saying that 1,000 conquest points have been used to convert 10 marbles. Kai, hugging the glowing orb, says it's now releasing marbles. Xiaoqing comments that the light really did have a female voice, but the main character notices the real problem is that Kai just spent 1,000 points in exchange for 10 marbles. Yun then tells Xiaoqing that it must be a trading orb and asks her to place her hand on it too. Several system messages start popping up, and the orb begins to close around Xiaoqing. The wings of the orb fold completely, and a silhouette appears inside. That's how a new profession is unlocked for Xiaoqing. She becomes a level B doctor. The system explains that this profession is good for making medicines and strange formulas, some with miraculous effects and others with heavy side effects. The main character, thinking through everything, realizes that this so-called profession change is actually replacing their original genes with some kind of mysterious gene. He figures that's probably why both of his evolutions were marked as genetically unevolved. In other words, it means that through genetic evolutions, he can get stronger. Xiaoqing is really happy with her new profession and says she now knows a lot of medical knowledge she didn't have before. She then asks the main character what profession he awakened. He doesn't say anything, and she comments that Yun is so stingy for not wanting to tell anyone. She adds that if he won't say it, then forget it, better to explore what else this orb can do. At that moment, the main character thinks the orb doesn't allow him to change professions. He looks at Kai and notices he also didn't change professions, and realizes they have something in common. They both completed their changes in the village. He wonders if that's why the orb isn't letting him switch professions. He keeps thinking and believes that, because he has the heroine book, he might be able to change professions as many times as he wants. Xiao Qing is surprised to learn that the orb can trade all kinds of things, from both this world and others, as long as the person has enough points. She stares at the main character, who asks if there's something wrong with his face. She says that in the other world, he was always pulling out weapons from nowhere and claimed he was trading them from some kind of shop. The main character says that's true and asks what the problem is. She shouts, saying Yun had been lying all along, because the only way to use the shop is through that orb, and only after completing the main mission. Annoyed by her accusations, the main character wonders if it was the heroine book that let him access the shop earlier. Just then, a system message appears on the glowing orb, congratulating them for completing the test and saying the next mission will begin in 3 days. It also says they can choose to stay in this world until the next mission or return to the real world. Kai says all of this is pretty fun. Xiao Qing decides to stay, since she doesn't have many relatives in the real world and wants to study her new profession more. The main character, on the other hand, decides to return to the real world. Before leaving, he asks Xiao Qing if he doesn't count as a friend in the real world. She blushes and her heart starts racing. Then he disappears, and she wonders if she should be his friend. A few seconds later, Yun begins to open his eyes. In front of him, the same girl from before appears and says she thought he had fainted in the street. The girl's boyfriend says it wasn't such a big deal, since Yun had just fallen on the ground. He adds that he gets really angry when someone touches his girlfriend on the street. The girl tells him to calm down, saying Yun didn't do anything wrong. The main character gets up and thinks that time moves differently in the two worlds, and it seems like neither of them saw the night. Looking up at the sky, he says he couldn't hear what Xiao Qing said before leaving, but decides he'll ask her when she comes back. Now, he decides to go check on his sister at the hospital. As he crosses the street, the traffic light turns red, and a speeding truck comes toward him and the girl. The main character grabs the girl and says he'll test his ability now. He activates Fire Elemental Lift, which crashes straight into the truck. The girl, seeing that the main character saved her, thinks he's a good man. Her boyfriend sees her in the main character's arms and asks if Yun wants to die. The truck driver, watching the whole scene, wonders if the main character is even human. The girl's boyfriend asks if she's okay, while she sighs, clearly impressed by the strong and mysterious figure that saved her. A few minutes later, at the hospital, a beautiful young woman is lying in a coma, with the TV on, showing local news. The main character looks at his sister and thinks that if he doesn't come back alive from that other world, his poor sister will have no one left to care for her. He turns to the TV and sees an image of a strange creature on the screen. Shocked, he wonders if that ghost is actually an ice and snow monster. He also thinks that maybe no one else can see it. Just then, a voice comes from behind the curtain, saying that the rest was nice and that it's good the brother is finally here, since it seems like they were chosen by fate. The main character recognizes the voice, opens the curtain, and sees that it's Kai. He asks what Kai is doing there and if he's a hospital patient. Kai says no, that he just came from the house next door. The main character thinks to himself, the house next door is the psychiatric hospital. But then he figures Kai must be a doctor there, sent to check on his sister and give a diagnosis. Kai stands up and says no, that the doctor actually said he's a patient and even gave him a certificate, asking if the main character wants to see it. Just then, Long Wei, deputy director of the special department, walks into the room asking for Yun. The main character says that's him and asks who she is, as more people enter the room. She introduces herself and says they're there to get some answers and asks him to cooperate. She asks if Yun can see the monsters and ghosts shown in the news, explaining that those are projections of the power of monsters about to invade this world. She says these monsters are the reason for the strange disasters happening around the world. She finishes by saying that only by completing missions in the other world can they stop the monsters from taking physical form. If that happens, the monsters will become the dominant force here. Before Yun traveled to the other world, Yu says, he had already come into contact with a ghost that was trying to invade this world. The main character is surprised by what he hears and asks if she's talking about that knight in heavy armor on a horse. He pauses for a moment and says that when they went to Longton village, he didn't see anyone like that there. Yu looks confused and asks how he didn't see him, since the outer world a person is sent to is supposed to be the one where the ghost is. Meanwhile, Kai is chewing on something. He's holding a huge piece of meat and asks Yun if he wants a bite too. The main character tries to make sense of the situation, while Kai explains that he met a man riding a big horse. The man refused to share his food, so Kai knocked him off the horse, stole the horse, and cooked it, saying it tasted great. Yu suddenly remembers that Kai did say he didn't enter the village on the first day, and it seems like he actually defeated the real boss. Since it looks like the ghost situation is solved, Yu asks the main character to take a test. She explains that he just needs to place his hand on the cube, and it will show his profession transfer level through a light. The main character agrees and places his hand on the cube. The cube reacts to his touch, and Yu thinks he must be at least a B rank, maybe even A, since he's her brother. But then the cube closes and goes back into the box. One of the agents says there wasn't any light at all, and that after so many tests, this is the first time something like this has happened. The main character feels embarrassed and jokes that at least he's one of a kind. Yu gets annoyed and says it's such a waste, since even an E rank, the lowest level, would still give off a white light. She wonders if he's the first F rank ever and feels disappointed for getting her hopes up and even making time to come personally. She leaves the room thinking it was a huge waste of time. One of the agents asks if she still plans to recruit him, but she says it would be pointless to recruit someone at E rank. Just then, the cube inside the suitcase starts glowing with a strong, multicolored light. The agent holding the suitcase asks his boss to wait a second, because it looks like the cube is reacting now. Yu quickly turns back and asks him to let her see it properly. He opens the suitcase, and a bright light bursts out. At that moment, there's a big explosion. One of the agents complains, saying that not only is the main character an E rank loser, but now he's broken their equipment too. Yu says that if it weren't for his sister, she would have already beaten him up. Back in the hospital room, the main character wonders why it's suddenly so noisy outside. Ignoring the sounds, he looks at the book of heroines and decides to try summoning the fox now. He gets into position and calls for the demon fox Daji. He's excited at the thought of being able to summon Daji right there. As he hugs the little fox, his phone rings, and a nurse walks into the room asking if he's a relative of the patient in bed 7. He picks up the phone and remembers that he had sent a business plan and scheduled a meeting with investor Sue for today. He quickly leaves the room, thanking the nurse for taking care of his sister and saying he'll settle the bill on time but needs to go now. A while later, at the Qingxi Group building, the investor the main character contacted arrives and asks if Yun wants him to come closer to where he is. The main character says there's no need. He hurries to get there, thinking that if he can close the deal, he won't have to worry about hospital expenses for his sister anymore. When he arrives at the building, the security guards stop him and ask if he read the sign. The main character says he didn't. The sign says that noisy people and dogs are not allowed inside. Daji gets annoyed and says she's not a dog, while the main character asks them to let him in, explaining that he needs to bring Daji with him. A man appears behind the main character, looks at Daji, and stutters, saying she's finally back. The main character tries to explain to the guards that he's not some random person and that he's actually the guest. The guard says he might be able to fool others, but not him. He's a top security professional. He asks if the main character is pretending to be Mr. Su. The main character tries to explain that he's not Mr. Su but someone else. Before he can finish, the guard cuts him off and accuses him of being bold for saying such things there. The man behind the main character steps forward and slaps the guard. The guard asks what his problem is, and the man replies by asking if he's blind. He then tells the main character to forget about what just happened and go in. Daji thanks the old man, while the main character is confused by his behavior. As the main character walks inside, the man thinks to himself that he needs to inform his master about their arrival. A few minutes later, inside the building, the receptionist tells the main character that this is Mr. Su's office and asks him to wait for a moment. Looking around, the main character thinks the place looks really fancy and beautiful. A man sitting nearby asks if he is Mr. Su. The receptionist explains that actually, Mr. Su invited the main character here. The man starts bragging about how he's been working there for 10 years and says his name is Lee Erget. Sitting back down on the couch, Lee asks if Madame Su invited him and whether she also asked him to come for some business talk. The main character asks if he's implying that this has something to do with him. The man says it's impossible for Madame Su to get involved with someone like the main character. At that moment, the president of the group, Sukin-ju, walks into the room and says that's a very bold assumption. She asks how anyone dares to accuse Mr. Chongyu like that. She slaps the arrogant man and then bows in front of the main character, saying she's paying respects to her ancestors. Yoon is speechless. Su asks what's going on, because no one is responding or saying anything. The man says their ancestor isn't in human form, so she can't speak like a human. Kneeling in front of Daji, Su thinks she understands what her ancestor wants. Since she doesn't want to reveal her human form, Su decides to speak on her behalf. Suddenly, Su starts barking nonstop, leaving the main character and Daji confused. Her uncle, on the other hand, is completely shocked by his niece's behavior, especially since she's always been cold and serious. The main character is sent out of the office, and Su asks him to wait outside for a moment. Lee Ergu kneels down and begs the main character to accept his respect, but the main character stays silent. Meanwhile, inside the office, Su is still trying to talk to Daji using dog language. Annoyed, Daji asks her to stop, saying that even after 100 years, the younger generation still isn't very smart. Daji explains that she's not a dog, she's a fox. Su finally says that Dada is willing to talk to her, and remembers that 100 years ago, when Daji came to the world, instead of causing harm, she brought great prosperity to the Su family, which helped them build their companies. Daji says there's no need to talk about that and tells Su to come closer because she needs her to do something. Daji whispers in Su's ear what she wants her to do and asks if she understood. Su says yes and that she will follow her dear ancestor's wishes. A few minutes later, Su comes out of the room carrying Daji and tells Yun that she read his proposal and is willing to cooperate. At that moment, Daji jumps into the main character's arms, and he asks if he needs to sign any contract. Sue says that since his matters are directly connected to the Sue family, there's no need for any paperwork. The main character wonders if everything is really supposed to be this casual. Some time passes, and night falls. The main character is inside a mansion and asks Uncle Joe why he brought him there. The man says that Miss Sue bought the house and that it's already in the main character's name. Joe drives off quickly, telling him to go to bed early because he'll be back later. Looking at the mansion gate, the main character thinks that at first, he thought the Sue family was tricking him since they didn't sign any contract. But now, seeing they actually bought a house and put it in his name, he starts to wonder if they're messing with him. As he goes inside, he thinks maybe something strange is going on, but since he's really tired, he decides to take a bath and rest so he'll be ready to go back to the other world when needed. After taking a bath, he wonders where Daji is, but thinking she might be in the other world, he just decides to sleep. When he enters the bedroom, he sees Sue, who says she's been waiting for him for a long time because she ate something really sweet and wanted to share it with him. Yoon suddenly feels like he's seeing heaven and even gets a nosebleed from excitement. Sue explains that her ancestor asked her to test Yun's Shin, but since she's always focused on her career, she doesn't have experience with this kind of thing. She adds that if things don't go well, her ancestor can't blame her. Then Sue asks what Yoon is waiting for. Nervously, he says that if she wants to talk, he can wait outside. In his thoughts, the main character worries that Sue might be tricking him since he has no money or power, but he decides to act anyway. He quickly turns around and ends up falling on top of Sue. She says that whatever comes out of a man's mouth is always a lie and that he's moving too fast. The main character tries to explain, saying it's not what she's thinking and that he's not worthy of something like that. In his mind, he thinks he should first put himself down and scare her a little so she'll back off. Sue, on the other hand, says that he is very worthy because he's the master of her ancestor, and anyone who goes against that is untrustworthy. Looking at Sue, the main character asks if that's true, and then Daji appears and asks how he could fall for such nonsense. The main character asks Daji to leave, saying Sue is a good person. But at that moment, Daji bites his finger. He's confused by her behavior. She keeps biting his finger and feels something strange while doing it. Suddenly, the main character starts feeling dizzy and completely passes out. Sue asks what they should do now. Daji says she can absorb energy from her host to recover, and that she just drained all of his energy. She asks Sue for help. 2 days later, still in the mansion, the main character wakes up wondering how long he's been asleep. Sue and Daji are sitting next to him. Daji says that next time, she won't drain so much energy from him. The main character gets up and asks what's going on because his body feels heavy. He asks Daji to explain everything and not to hide anything. Daji decides to tell him everything. Some time passes, and the main character asks if he understood correctly. It was Daji who brought wealth to the Sue family 100 years ago, and to test his character, she asked Sue to test him. Then Daji almost drained all his life energy to restore her human form. Embarrassed, he says that next time won't be the same. Daji stands up and says she knew he was a kind master and now likes him even more. At that moment, a light flashes around them. The main character asks what's happening, and Daji says it's already been 2 days since he passed out and 3 days since they returned from the other world. The main character panics and asks if it's already time for the next mission. When he wakes up in the other world, a message from the system appears, showing that the main mission is a 7-day survival task. He notices that Daji has turned back into her fox form, which he actually finds better, since it won't attract much attention. As he stands up, he sees Kai and Xiaoqing, but something else catches his eye. A few people are sitting not far from them. Xiaoqing walks over and says those people are probably their teammates for this mission, but she didn't earn any points for figuring that out. The main character thinks it's obvious there wouldn't be points for that since everyone arrived at the same time. Looking around, he notices there are 7 people now, 2 more than last time. He thinks that the more people there are, the harder the mission will be. Feeling confident, he introduces himself first as an inexperienced newcomer and briefly explains everything that happened during the previous mission to the others. After the explanation, Yoon earns 100 points, which makes him really excited. He then says that the mission boss won't leave them alone, so they need to quickly find clues about him. One of the men, named Wang Dehai, doesn't believe anything the main character says and even suspects he might be one of the kidnappers in disguise. Dehai throws a bunch of cash into the air and asks him to name his price. The woman next to Dehai says that there's nothing Mr. Wang can't solve. The main character stares at Dehai for a moment, then walks toward him holding a weapon. Yoon says he already explained everything he needed to, and it's up to Dehai to believe it or not, but he asks him not to mess with him like that. Then, he asks the others to share what they saw before arriving here. One of the men says that the sun turned into an object and hit him, which brought him there. The girl with pink hair says something similar happened to her. She was out shopping with Mr. Wang when a fireball hit them both, and that's how they ended up there. The main character wonders if the fireball might be some kind of special ability. Xiaoqing says maybe it was an attack from the boss they're supposed to find. At that moment, a group of soldiers approaches, and the leader, named Jiwei, asks who they are. The main character looks at her and thinks she must be the heroine this time. He walks toward an injured person being carried by the soldiers and wonders if this is a victim of the mission boss. but he also wonders why this person's eyes were burned. Jiwei starts calling for a military doctor, but one of her men says the doctor is outside the camp, and no one knows where he went. The main character nudges Xiaoqing and suggests she try to help since she has some medical skills. Smiling, Jiwei agrees, and right then, the main character gains 10% favorability with the heroine. Looking at Xiaoqing, the main character asks Jiwei who the injured people are, but the general looks confused. Feeling awkward, Yun explains that they're new here and don't really know how things work. Jiwei says the injured people are from an exploration team she sent out half a month ago. That team had sent a message by carrier pigeon saying they found the tomb of Master Kwafu in the valley but ran into trouble along the way. The only name mentioned in the message was Shifan. Jiwei immediately sent a rescue team, but then got another message from the support team, saying the exploration team had suffered serious burns, gone insane, and ripped out their own eyes. After that, Jiwei ordered everyone to return immediately, and now everyone can see the result. Thinking over the situation, the main character wonders if the mission boss is actually inside the city. Just then, Xiaoqing calls Yun and says the people are already gone and asks what he wants her to do now to help them. Because of this, the heroine's favorability drops, leaving the main character shocked. Meanwhile, in the city of Duansho, the girl with pink hair asks Mr. Wang if it's really okay to run away like that. Dahai says the city is probably just a film set and even the Taoist decorations are fake. He adds that she's still young and hasn't seen much of the world. Looking at her, he says he earns millions every second, so he needs to get out of the city fast. But then something catches the girl's attention, and she looks terrified. She calls Mr. Wang and points to a humanoid figure on top of the city wall, asking if that's also some kind of prop. Back where the protagonist is, one of the soldiers tells the general that a giant is attacking. She starts walking and tells everyone to follow her to the city wall. The protagonist says they want to join too, and the general stares at him for a few seconds. Meanwhile, he thinks this could be a good chance to get more clues about the boss. He keeps talking and says she doesn't need to worry about them, even if they're new. They knew what they were signing up for when they joined the army. After hearing that, Jiwei asks if he's hiding the fact that he's actually a veteran. Once again, his favorability with her goes up. The general decides to take everyone along and asks the soldiers to hand out weapons. In the armory, the protagonist asks if they're really allowed to choose any weapon, and the soldier says yes, they won't cry over losing one or two. The protagonist tells the others to pick first, and he'll choose later. Xiaoqing says he's very kind, while Kai says he wants the full set. The soldier looks at the protagonist and wonders why he's being so polite. There are plenty of weapons, so it doesn't really matter who chooses first. Then the soldier changes his mind and says he'll pick first, because war won't wait for anyone. Back at the front line, the general orders the archers to attack. She thinks the giant race was supposed to be extinct and never expected to be attacked again. She's worried whether the Great Wall, built 200 years ago, will hold. The arrows hit the giant, but it quickly fights back, punching the wall and knocking down many soldiers. As a large hole forms, the Titan tries to enter through it. Dahai and his wife are standing right in front of it. She says she's scared, but Dahai, still relaxed, says it must be a movie shoot. One soldier tells the spearman to get ready. Dahai watches the soldiers line up and tells someone to call the director. He's enjoying the movie. The giant breaks through the wall, and the soldiers throw their spears, but the Titan hits many of them with a single attack. The general says this is exactly what she feared. One soldier tells another to follow the general's orders and move quickly. Jiwei asks where the new recruit is, and another soldier guesses he ran away from the fight. She says it's expected, they're only human, and they're still new, never been in real battle. The general thinks the protagonist is just good at talking and shouldn't expect much from him. Again, her favorability drops. Meanwhile, Mr. Wang kneels beside one of the fallen soldiers and is shocked to realize this isn't a film. The Titan turns to face them. The woman asks what they should do now, but Dahai tells her not to worry, it's just special effects. But then the giant's hand reaches toward her, and in a panic, she starts cursing Dahai and says she won't let him get away, even as a ghost. Dahai looks back and thinks women are foolish. He could buy ghosts with money if he wanted. He even thinks it should be an honor for her to die for someone like him, since her life was worthless anyway. Then the giant grabs her. The general asks if the soldiers carrying the cannons have arrived yet. One of them says all the weapons, including the cannons, are gone, there's nothing left. The general is stunned. The soldiers begin whispering, thinking the city will be destroyed without weapons and they don't want to die here. One of them kneels down, wondering how this happened, since the whole arsenal was supposed to be full. But then a voice says that's not completely true. The protagonist shows up, saying he kept the general waiting for too long. Looking at him, Jiwei thinks he appeared just when the soldiers were about to run. His favorability points go back up by 20. One soldier asks what difference the protagonist can make, and adds that a rookie shouldn't act like a hero. The protagonist then starts summoning all the weapons, saying that fear only comes from lack of firepower. He tells the general to watch closely. At that moment, the Titan is hit by every weapon the protagonist fired. The Titan falls, badly injured, and a system message appears, congratulating him for completing the mission to defeat the giant. Confident, the protagonist tells the general general he didn't let her down. She proudly agrees and says he deserves full credit for the battle. One of the soldiers looks at a cannon and realizes it looks familiar. He then figures out those are the stolen weapons. The man points at the protagonist and yells that he's the one who stole them. The general hits the soldier and tells him to shut up, saying talent like Eam's is rare in the army. She turns to the other soldiers and says she already knew he emptied the arsenal, but if he hadn't, the cannons wouldn't have been in place in time, and the giant would have destroyed the entire city. The soldiers try to argue, saying they helped too, but now they have no weapons left. Even if they charge ahead, they won't be able to do any more damage to that monster. The protagonist walks up and says he has weapons, telling them to pick theirs. The soldiers are happy to get their weapons back and impressed by how fast he brought them. But the soldier on the ground sarcastically says the protagonist is very generous, just taking other people's stuff like that. The general, proud of her new recruit, thinks he's very fair and selfless. At that moment, the protagonist is happy because the general's favorability rating towards him reaches 40%. She looks at the soldier on the ground and asks what good he is if all he does is mock others. The soldier tries to respond but gives up. In her thoughts, the general assumes it's jealousy, but silently tells the man to stop talking about it, because if he keeps going, the hero might get punished. Sometime later, everyone gathers near the giant. The protagonist says the giant never used any fireball attacks, so he must not be the boss of this place. One soldier walks up to the general and asks what they should do with the body. Xiao Qing excitedly suggests dissecting it, saying she's never cut open something so big before. She wants to see what it's like and pulls out a sharp scalpel. The protagonist and the general are speechless. The protagonist remembers the general sent an exploration team and asks about the only survivor, who was in critical condition. He wants to know where the rescue team is now. Nervous, the general says the survivor is actually almost completely fine. The protagonist asks why she didn't say that before, and she tells him to follow her so she can take him to the survivor. A few minutes later, at another spot in the city, the general points to a building and says the survivor is inside. Looking at the place, the protagonist asks if she's holding a prisoner there. The general says no, explaining that it was the survivor's own request. She also says that once they go in, they need to shut the door immediately because sunlight seems to bother him. The protagonist pulls Xiao Qing with him and tells her to come along. Confused, Xiao Qing asks why he called her, and he says that since she's the only doctor available, they at least need to try speaking to the survivor and checking his condition. When they try to open the door, a desperate voice from inside asks who opened the door and says, "They will find out." The protagonist asks Xiao Qing if she can see anything, but she says she can't even see her own feet. The protagonist wonders why he can see, and Daji answers, saying it's because of her night vision, which she's sharing with Yoon. She explains that everything he's seeing is based on the energy waves he sends out as he moves, like sonar. The protagonist understands and comments that that's why everything looks gray. Xiao Qing asks who he's talking to, says she can't see anything, and wonders if they can open at least one window. The protagonist holds her hand and asks if she forgot what General Mu said. Just then, something grabs the protagonist's attention. The man in front of him is surrounded by multiple eyes. He starts stammering, asking them not to open the window because they will see everything. Then, he starts saying nonsense, repeating the same things. The protagonist asks Daji if she saw that too. Daji says the energy is a materialized form of spiritual energy created by some being. She explains that the man always says, "They'll see," and usually this kind of energy takes on the form of whatever being it's from, but she thinks the survivor is referring to the eyes. The protagonist figures out that what they're seeing isn't real, it's just meant to scare people. Daji warns him not to jump to conclusions, because it could still attack someone. The protagonist tries talking to the man, saying General Mu sent them and they just want to ask a few questions. But the man, clearly disturbed, quickly says not to ask anything because he doesn't know anything. He ends by saying they will find them. The protagonist realizes the man is terrified of the eyes and that they won't get any information unless they do something. Daji asks what kind of move he's thinking. The protagonist suddenly throws Daji far away from the man, and the materialized energy grabs her immediately. He asks the man if he can talk now. Still shaken, the man starts to explain that the exploration team discovered the ancient tomb of the legendary giant Kwa Fu, and when the rescue team arrived, the tomb was already open. He says he saw Kwa Fu's massive body, still intact after thousands of years, but the eyes had been removed, leaving big, black holes, and the body was covered in blurred markings. The survivor remembers that everyone except him touched the body, and they were all burned, even though there was no fire. He didn't see anything around them. He thinks it was some kind of poison in Kwa Fu's body. The protagonist thinks about all this and asks what that has to do with the man being so afraid of being found by them. The man starts trembling, saying that everything they saw and know is only what they were allowed to see. but he adds that he didn't see it with his own eyes. At that moment, a huge bolt of lightning shoots through the room, passing right by the protagonist and the soldier, scaring them. The lightning was so strong it pierced through the building walls. The one responsible for it was Daddy, who, clearly upset, asks how that thing dared to attack her with such a weak form of energy. The protagonist, annoyed, questions Daji's approach, especially during such a critical moment. Then, he notices a strange mask in his hand and remembers the survivor. Looking around, he realizes where the man was and says that this isn't good. The soldier, who had removed his own eyes, says they found that mask in the tomb and asks the protagonist to keep it safe. Yoon tries to stop the man from doing anything reckless, but the man says it's too late because they've already found him, and that's why his body is out of control. He believes he should have been dead a long time ago. The man, falling to the ground, says the only reason he's still alive is because he abandoned his comrades and ran away. Now, all he wants is to return to their side and fight again. He says he's heard of Yoon and that Yoon is brave, something he himself wasn't at the time. His final request is that the protagonist never trusts his eyes, because that's how they watch people. His last words are, "Kwa Fu chasing the sun." The protagonist, feeling helpless, just watches the man go, still in shock and unable to react. In his thoughts, he keeps thinking that he was right there with the man, and yet he couldn't save him. Daji, sitting on Xiao Qing's shoulder, asks what's wrong with her master. Xiao Qing says Daji wouldn't understand, because she's not human. Then Xiao Qing asks Daji if she knows what the most painful thing in the world is. Before Daji can answer, Xiao Qing says it's when someone starts disappearing right in front of you and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Xiao Qing then gets startled and asks Daji, "Weren't you a dog? Why are you talking now?" Offended, Daji says she's not a dog, she's a fox, and asks if this is really the time to focus on that. She then asks Yun what they should do now. The protagonist asks Xiao Qing if she figured anything out. Xiao Qing says the man was talking about eyes and being watched, and he might be right. She explains that the eyes have a different immune system, so they can be attacked by bacteria that cause eye diseases. Though not proven, many people believe that eyes are actually parasites living in the human body. She goes on to say that when she looked into the giant's eyes, she saw that they were completely dead. This shows that when the giant attacked the city, he was completely blind. The protagonist then concludes that the boss they faced back then was related to the eyes. He also wonders if the soldier feared the eyes because, in the light, they could see everything. On top of that, Yun starts to question what the man meant when he mentioned Kwa Fu chasing the sun. Later, still inside the building, the general tells her men to give the soldier a proper burial. Watching all of it, the protagonist keeps thinking about what that phrase really meant. One of the men nearby hears the protagonist murmuring and says that, in ancient mythology, there was a massive mountain in the desert. Deep within that mountain, surrounded by forests, lived a group of giants. They were strong and carefree, and their leader was named Kwa Fu. The man continues, saying that one year, the sun burned so hot that it hurt the people. Crops were ruined, trees and rivers dried up, and many people died from the heat. Seeing this, Kwa Fu said the sun was cruel and that he would chase it down, control it, and make it obey him. His people tried to stop him, but Kwa Fu was determined. In the end, though, the man says Kwa Fu failed and died from exhaustion. Then, a young woman steps in and says she heard a different version. In her version, Kwa Fu did catch up to the sun and even fought it. She says the giants were ancestors of humans and didn't have eyes. Kwa Fu chased the sun through many lands until he reached the valley of Tang. There, he fought the sun and managed to knock one of them down. But when the sun fell, its flames hit Kwa Fu's face and burned 2 holes in it. That's how humans got eyes, which, though strange, were passed down over generations. The man replies that if her story is true, then maybe the sun mentioned isn't the one we know. He suggests that maybe the sun in the myth was some kind of alien, and that humans might have been fighting off an invasion. He finishes by saying that everyone got infected, and those parasites are actually the eyes. The protagonist then asks, so in short, humans didn't have eyes at first, and now these parasites use human bodies to reproduce? Xiao Qing says that's impossible. The man, wiping his glasses, replies that it was just a theory based on the story the girl told. He adds that the ones who are infected are the people from this world, and since they're already used to it, they'll be fine. Relieved, Xiao Qing says he should have said that earlier, because she got scared. Just then, a huge dust cloud appears in the distance. A group of soldiers is marching toward the protagonist and the others. They surround them. Xiao Qing, annoyed, asks Yun if he feels like something's missing. She says Kai disappeared again and left them behind. A general, looking scared, says those are the Imperial Guards and asks what they're doing there. Pointing his sword at the main character, the leader of the guards asks if he was the one who pushed the soldier earlier. He goes on to say they received orders saying the main character and the others were causing trouble in the city and needed to be arrested. The general grabs the sword blade and says that the soldier fell off the building by himself and that it had nothing to do with Yun. She wonders how the Imperial Army found out about this so quickly since it just happened. The leader of the guard says the Emperor Cam declared them guilty. The general asks if he's suggesting she's involved just for defending them. She starts to say something, but the main character cuts her off, asking her to let it go and be careful with her hand. Facing away from the man, the general says says that he's Ling Tian, one of the Emperor Cam's closest guards, and not a good person. He's now trying to frame Yoon. She thinks to herself that if she doesn't step in, how could someone like Yoon, who's just a recruit, handle this? The leader tells the general to mind her own business unless she wants to be called to the palace later. The main character activates his powers and says he'll handle it. Then, Daji shows up in his true form, now with lightning powers, and attacks the guard leader. A cloud of dust forms from the impact. The main character tells the general he already talked to that guy, and he didn't seem as stubborn as she made him out to be. The leader of the guards, now scratched up, says he knew the main character and the others were special, and that if they need anything, they can call him. The general is shocked at his sudden change and thinks not even his mother would recognize him. She reflects on how strong the main character is and starts to admire him, with her favorability rising to 50%. Yoon asks the leader if they're not going to the Cam Palace. The man says there's no need to call him leader, and that they're just taking a little trip to the palace, like going home. The general warns the main character that the Emperor Cam has over 300 years of wisdom, so when they meet him, he should be careful about what he says. Yoon thanks her for the advice. The general is still worried and wonders if they've been watching the recruits all along. Just then, a soldier runs up with urgent news. He says the official army list came in, and it shows no new recruits were added recently. The general, confused, asks what he means. The soldier explains that at the training grounds, where they met the supposed new recruits, a body was found, completely unrecognizable. He adds that the clothes on the body were strange and didn't match anyone from the area, but looked just like the clothes worn by the supposed recruits. A few minutes later, they arrive at Cam's palace, and the guard leader announces their arrival. Emperor Cam greets them, saying they did a good job. The main character looks at the emperor and wonders why he's so covered up, noticing that his mask looks a lot like the one he received, except Cam can see through his. Xiao Qing uses her vision ability and gets scared after seeing the emperor's body. She tells the main character something's wrong with Cam, explaining that since he was fully covered, she used her vision and sense of smell, and found that his body has no vital signs, which means he should be dead, but he's sitting right there. The main character looks at her suspiciously but says nothing. The emperor thanks them for coming and for dealing with the giant, but says they shouldn't have thrown that soldier off the building, adding that none of them are actually from around here or real recruits. As they get surrounded, the emperor asks if they realize what they've done. The soldiers start asking why the guard leader didn't draw his sword and follow the emperor's orders. In his mind, Ling just wants everyone to shut up because none of them have seen how powerful Yoon really is. Then, Cam says he's willing to give them all a chance if they officially join his army to help fight the giants. If they do that, he'll let everything else go. The main character tells Cam that he knows the soldier wasn't pushed off the building. The emperor says that if the main character says Yoon didn't push him, then he didn't, but it's his choice to make. The team wonders if they really even have a choice. Then, a voice says that of course they have a choice. Xiao Qing asks who said that, and when she looks at the emperor, she sees a man holding him hostage and assumes it was him who spoke. The guard leader draws his sword and orders all the soldiers outside the hall to be called in immediately. Xiao Qing, scared, tells the main character that the person looks a lot like Kai. The main character tells her to speak more confidently. She replies that, if she has to say it like that, then yes, it is Kai. The main character jokes that maybe she should leave their team. Kai then tells him that they were born royalty. Guard Ling is shocked, because when he said going to the palace would be like going home, he only meant it as a polite comment. Xiao Qing tells Kai to give up because the place is full of imperial guards. Kai replies that women will only slow down his blade. The soldiers rush in, screaming for the emperor, but then Kai is blown away by a massive fire attack. Cam stands up with an orb that looks like an eye in his hand, asking if this little bug really thinks it can humiliate him. He turns toward the main character and says it's Yun's turn now, warning that anyone who doesn't submit will be destroyed. Then he fires another fire attack. Xiao Qing panics, and the main character activates his dragon scale. Seeing all the proof he was looking for, he wonders if Cam is really Cancer, the boss they've been searching for. The fire attack is about to hit Yun and Xiao Qing, but the main character activates his transformation. Right then, a pair of long, tall legs appear in front of him, protecting him from the fire. The girl who was telling the story earlier says she's glad she replaced her eyes with human ones because she finally found the sun puppy. Smiling, she asks if he wants to join Ling's side. Xiao Qing, looking at everything happening, asks if he even has a choice. At that moment, the giantess is surrounded by Cam's power, and he says that even if an insect is big, it can still be roasted. The giantess, affected by the sun's attack, says that she secretly switched her eyes to human ones when she came in, but she didn't expect to be attacked like this. Xiao Qing asks the main guy what they should do now, and he says everyone should head to the giant's camp before her transformation wears off. As they climb onto the giantess's hand, Xiao Qing asks what the main guy plans to do, and he says he'll stay behind to try to hold off Cam. At that moment, the main guy and the guard leader stare at each other in silence. The guard leader, nervous, thinks he's screwed either way, whether he follows Cam or the main guy. He feels like it's all over for him and he doesn't have much time left. Suddenly, Cam asks Commander Ling what he's doing and why he hasn't captured the little thief yet. Commander Ling says he would never do that. Then Yoon says to wait, that he's joining them. A system message pops up saying that Yoon has joined the human camp, leaving Cam speechless and Commander Ling confused. Emperor Cam says he heard about the main guy's success with the giant, but he believes Yoon understands the current situation and asks if it's already too late. The main guy buys a few sacks of flour and throws them at Cam. He says there's no point trying to stop him, he's just buying time. Trying to shield their faces, Commander Ling and Emperor Cam wonder if that's really flour. The main guy channels his attack and says, with everything dry around them, they'd better be careful with fire. Cam looks at the orb in his hand and notices something's off. Suddenly, it explodes. The blast is so strong it almost hits the giantess and the others running away. One of the team members looks back and wonders if that's really what flour smells like. To protect himself from the blast, the main guy hides inside one of the dragon eggs. Meanwhile, at the army camp, the general is taking a bath and thinking about what might happen to the main guy. She tells herself not to worry, that it's not like Yoon will show up in front of her right now, so it's better to stop thinking about him. Just then, a shiny golden object flies down from the sky and crashes right into her tent, landing straight in the bathtub with her. A soldier runs into the tent, saying the emperor is in trouble because there was a huge explosion in the main building. When he enters, he sees the general and a giant golden egg, and asks if she laid it. Annoyed, the general throws the bath ladle at his head and threatens to punish him if he doesn't leave immediately. The soldier agrees and quickly runs off. Suddenly, the golden egg starts to open, and the main guy awkwardly steps out of it, saying it was a big coincidence. He turns to Daji and asks her to think of something quickly. Just then, a system message says that his favorability with the general has increased. Confused, he wonders how that even happened now. He asks Daji what she did. She walks away and says it was the only idea she had, but in her thoughts, she's smiling, thinking this is payback for him calling her a dog. Embarrassed, the main guy looks at the general, who seems a bit enchanted. She tells him to be brave, since he came to her camp late at night and is still armed. She asks if he came to take her down. With a big nosebleed, he thinks he's not hiding any weapon, but says he really respects the general. She says that if he came with bad intentions, then he should use all his strength and skill, because she won't go easy on him. Suddenly, she kisses him and jumps on him, hugging him. She asks if he's just acting or if he actually cares about her. He says he really respects her, but she's making him nervous. Throwing his clothes aside, he says he's offended by what she said. The general is shocked, and he says he'd never say no to a real man. Then he starts doing everything he can, just like she asked, saying she'll find out how much she can handle. The general feels like she's erupting like a volcano. Meanwhile, outside, one soldier says the noises sound like tsunamis and volcanic eruptions. They wonder if there's some kind of natural disaster happening, but the older soldier says this kind of disaster is caused by people, and the younger guy wouldn't understand. The next morning, the general tells the main guy he convinced her. She helps him get dressed and says it's already late, and that Mulan will help him. Just then, the system from the heroine book pops up, congratulating him for winning over another heroine, Mulan. After a long and tiring night, the chains around a card break, revealing the image of General King in front of him. Looking at the card's info, he asks what a sacred swordsman is. The system explains that it's a warrior with a holy sword who can use divine power to fight evil. Then it asks what ability he wants to borrow from her. The system says she has a big sacred sword, leaving him speechless. The general comes over and says she has something to tell him. The quartermaster found a body where he first appeared, which could mean there are other giants hiding among them. She says it's okay, though, because that one doesn't seem like a threat. Right then, a soldier yells from outside, saying there's an urgent report. Out of breath, the soldier kneels and reports that another giant has appeared and is attacking the city. The general asks Yoon to come with her to the wall and help defend the city, since he's the most experienced. The main guy asks her to wait a second and then asks if she would still fight for Cam if he turned out to be the enemy. Mulan lowers her head and asks if he knows why she, as a woman, wears a military uniform. She explains it's because there's a traitor in her family, which damaged their honor and caused them to lose the lands their ancestors had won. That's why she became a general, to make up for her brother's mistakes and protect the wall. She asks the main character if he wants her to become like her brother. Then she clearly says that even if Cam is a bad person, she would never betray him. Even if he orders her to die, she will. The main character admits she's loyal, but says her ideas are foolish. A soldier gets angry and asks how he dares to speak like that to the general. Both the main character and the general hit the soldier and tell him to leave since it's none of his business. Embarrassed, the two stare at each other in silence until the general says they'll talk about it later. Right now, she needs to head to the wall and defend against the enemy attack. The main character agrees, and they say goodbye. The soldier lying on the ground says that in this world, he's the only one who ends up hurt. Leaving the tent, Yuan sees Mulan running to her post. Daji reappears on the main character's shoulder, and he calls her Little Fox, saying since the general isn't convinced yet, it's time to start Plan B. He holds up a large syringe, and Daji grabs it with her mouth, happy that he finally got it right. She's a fox, not a dog. She tells him not to worry because she'll complete the task perfectly. A few minutes later, the soldiers get ready to defend the wall. The main character walks up to the general, and she asks how many giants are attacking. A scared soldier answers that it looks like all the giants from the valley are there. The general is shocked and asks how that's even possible and if there's any chance of winning. Since the main character chose to side with the humans, he starts getting missions to help fight off the giants and protect humanity. Meanwhile, the rest of the team, who chose the giant side, get missions to destroy the city. Xiao Qing, trying to balance on a giant's shoulder, wonders why the giant suddenly went crazy. Kai, sitting on another giant's shoulder, waves at the main character from afar. Xiao Qing, suspicious, asks if he joined the human camp, seeing him smile. She angrily questions why he asked them to join the giants while he went to the humans. Just then, the giant Xiao Qing prepares to attack the main character. She panics and warns him, but Mulan jumps in front of him and blocks the attack with her sacred sword. She looks at the giant and tells him not to dare hurt her dear husband. Everyone nearby is shocked and confused by the word husband. The main character just asks her not to make trouble because he already has too many women, but in his mind, he hopes Daji doesn't let him down now. While the general holds off the giant strike, the main character starts smiling, then gets serious and says that all the giants here are trash. The giants go wild with rage after hearing that, and even Xiao Qing gets mad, asking what he means by that, since the giants are already naturally hostile. The main character raises his hand and tells the soldiers not to be afraid because the giants came for him. The soldiers feel moved and even a little emotional at his words. At the same time, the general wonders if he understands how she feels, and thinks that if he doesn't have a good explanation, she'll kill him without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the Emperor Cam's central building, everything is in ruins. Daji is there, still holding the syringe, looking for someone because her master won't last much longer. Suddenly, she sees Emperor Cam, who stares at her confused, wondering why that dog sounds like a human. Daji quickly takes her human form and uses her fox powers to seduce the emperor, asking him to have a little fun. The man, fully charmed, lets her go ahead with her plan. She tells him to relax, since the needle is really big. Suddenly, Cam starts growing in size, and Daji covers him with a white cloth. He turns into a giant, which surprises the soldiers at the wall. They think there are now giants inside the walls. The main character uses the moment to create chaos, yelling that Emperor Khan is in danger and pointing at the giant. He says he'll fight that giant to protect Cam and tells everyone that since they're all meant to die anyway, the dead should follow him. The soldiers get pumped and follow his lead. At the same time, one of the giants hits the wall, but the men had already jumped down to follow the main character. The general, still on the wall, finds it all very suspicious. Just recently, Yun had asked her to rebel against Cam, and now he seems to care about Cam's safety. A soldier says he used to be against Yun too, but now he trusts him, just like the rest of the troops. The general, confused, listens as the soldier says Yun is playing a big game of chess. He explains that Yun made it look like she was rebelling just to prove her loyalty, since she's the woman he likes, and he wanted to test her character. After all, behind every successful man, there's a trustworthy woman. The general asks if he's sure about that, since he didn't believe in her before. She then says Yun first drew the giant's attention to himself by pretending to protect the soldiers, and now he's leading them away from the wall, putting them in even more danger. The soldier denies this and asks if she really knows the soldiers well. Then he answers his own question, saying that staying on the wall meant facing a group of giants, while following Yun meant facing just one, and that's human nature. Excited, he adds that after their army was left helpless against the giants, they chose to follow Yun to defeat the enemy. That's also human nature. According to him, Yun is using human nature to eliminate the enemy. Then he thinks for a moment and says Yun's reason for doing this goes deeper. The general asks if it's selfishness, and the man, with shining eyes, points at her and says yes, Ion did all of this for her. He asks if she's happier now, because Yun is doing all of it to maintain peace in her name. The general is moved by his words. At that moment, one of the giants breaks through the wall and enters the city, followed by the others. Xiao Qing, sitting on one of their shoulders, is still angry at the protagonist. She asks why he's trying to save Cam and calls all the soldiers to action. The older man in the group explains that it's easy to understand. There's always been a natural hostility between humans and giants, so they were bound to team up somehow. He says Yun is a huge idiot, but this is how both sides can attack Cam at the same time. The protagonist, sitting on the shoulder of the supposed giant covered in a white cloth, tells the soldiers to attack without mercy, saying Cam must have already been killed by that giant. But one of the soldiers asks if anyone else thinks it's weird that the giant is covered in a white cloth and looks familiar. Another soldier scolds him, telling him to stop overthinking and just follow Lord Yun. The giants get closer and start attacking the covered giant, while the protagonist jumps away, telling them to hit harder. Xiao Qing, confused, asks if that covered giant could really be Cam, and the man says yes, wondering if their plan will work. The covered giant lets out a loud cry, clearly injured. Watching from the wall, the general notices something is wrong. She wonders why her husband and the others were heading to the palace at the center of the city earlier, but now they're all going toward the east wall. At that moment, the east wall starts to collapse. Kai walks up to Yoon and says he doesn't need to jump into the sea to know what it tastes like, then tells Yoon to follow him. Looking ahead, the protagonist wonders why the giant covered in white cloth suddenly turned into a crumbling wall. Right then, the giants attack the wall and the nearby soldiers. One of them shouts for everyone to fight back and avenge the death of Emperor Cam. Yoon, confused, wonders how they ended up there. Looking down, he tries to make sense of what's happening, when a voice suddenly says they were all tricked. A person appears wearing the same mask as Kai and says everything they just saw was just illusions created by their own eyes. The protagonist turns and asks who this person is, while Kai greets them and calls them the ambassador. Yoon asks if Kai knows them, and Kai says the ambassador was the one who gave him that mask. He also taught him a secret technique involving pressing the kidneys to turn them into a stomach. The protagonist wonders if that's the same technique for locating things by sound that he just learned from Mulan. The ambassador then turns around, and the protagonist asks him to wait, thinking he might have useful information. The ambassador confirms that he does, but says there's no time for that now. Something more important needs to be done. He throws one of his masks and says it's a thank you gift to Yoon for taking care of his little sister. Holding both masks, Yoon asks who his sister is. The ambassador replies that it's Mulan. Then he presses a button on a device at his waist and jumps far away. Watching him disappear, the protagonist realizes this is the brother Mulan mentioned earlier. Just before vanishing, the ambassador shouts that his last name is Hong and his name is Yan Hai. The protagonist just turns away, saying nothing. Meanwhile, at the ruins in the center of the city, Cam is holding Daji. He says that she's the legendary fox demon and asks if she really thought she could charm him. Laughing, he says it was all an illusion created by her eyes. Cam asks why she came to this world. Daji thinks to herself that she's not close enough to a mountain or forest to absorb energy and turn into a nine-tailed fox. Cam lifts one hand, absorbing power from that giant eye, and asks if her clan, besides creating illusions, can also control fire. He continues, saying that since she came to him, he might as well use her power to strengthen the clone his master gave him. Laughing again, Cam says that after 300 years, he can finally carry out his plan, and after absorbing the remaining giants, his master will awaken, and Cam will gain a true reincarnation. Somewhere else in the city, the general is running, saying Yoon and the soldiers might be in danger. She tries to reach them, but some nearby citizens notice something floating in the sky. A child asks what it is, and their mother says it might be the sun. Suddenly, people start screaming, and their eyes catch fire. These people begin turning into monsters with giant eyes. The general arrives and is shocked by what's happening to the city's people. The monsters move toward her, saying they're starving. Mulan feels lost. These are the people she's protected for years, and she doesn't want to hurt them. At that moment, the ambassador shows up and cuts down all the monsters. He says he never thought the 3D mobile device made by his ancestors to kill giants would now help fight humans. Smiling, he says it's all ridiculous, since his ancestors never even figured out who the real enemy was before they died. He pulls his mask down a bit and looks at Mulan, saying he's disappointed she hasn't made any progress after all this time. The general is shocked to see her brother there. The ambassador offers her a mask and says that if she doesn't want to become one of them, she should wear it, but warns her not to look at the giant eye. Angry, the general asks how he had the nerve to come back. Her brother says she still doesn't get it. Everything is part of Cam's conspiracy. How could a normal person live for more than 300 years? He explains that to stay alive, Cam betrayed humanity and hid in Yen King. Meanwhile, more monsters start invading the city. The main character puts on the mask and watches everything happening around him. He notices that some kind of eye shield activates when he wears the mask. Just then, a giant jumps out of the water toward the wall and warns everyone not to look at the eye in the sky. The main character throws masks at Shell King and the old man, asking them to wear them. He asks Lingling if she removed her human eyes, and she smiles, saying he doesn't need to worry because giants can move around just fine without eyes. She adds that the eyes she took weren't hers anyway. Xiaoqing asks Yun if he can see anything while wearing the mask. He says yes, because he's using his spiritual vision ability, and promises to explain everything later. The main character turns to her and asks where the giants went after falling into the water. She tells him not to worry because they're all fine and took different routes to keep moving forward. But right then, a giant appears who looks just like the monsters. The main character thinks Lingling was being too optimistic and, deep down, doesn't believe the giants weren't affected by the giant eye. And this is where the video ends. Like this video for more juicy content, and smack that subscribe button for regular updates.